Hi friends, my name is Stanley Wolfe, and I've been walking the road of retirement for well over a decade now. I won't tell you my exact age, but let's just say I've had plenty of mornings sipping coffee without a work clock to punch, and more afternoons watching grandkids play ball than I ever did when I was still working. Over these years, I've learned that retirement isn't just about stopping work. It's about learning how to live with the money you've saved, the choices you've made, and the surprises life keeps sending your way. When I first retired, I thought I had it all figured out. Like many of you, I had heard the old rule of thumb. You'll only spend 70 to 80% of what you spent during your working years. But let me tell you, reality doesn't always fit neatly into those rules. Some years I found myself spending more than I ever expected on family trips, on health, on those little things you think you deserve after working hard all your life. Other years, the budget sat quiet, almost predictable. That's why today I want to share with you something powerful, real numbers, real research, not just guesses. J.P. Morgan studied the spending habits of millions of American households, and what they found might change the way you think about your retirement. It sure opened my eyes, even after living this life for so long. So in this video, we'll walk through what the data says about how people actually spend in retirement, the patterns, the surprises, and the lessons you and I can take to heart. Because my mission now in this season of life is simple: to help folks like you retire with peace of mind, without fear, and with the wisdom to enjoy these years fully. Now, I've always believed in stories. Stories teach us lessons, they guide us, and sometimes they warn us. But when it comes to retirement, stories aren't always enough. We need facts. We need real numbers. I learned that lesson the hard way back when I first started budgeting after I retired. My neighbor Frank would say, "Stanley, don't worry, you'll only spend 3/4 of what you did before." And I wanted to believe him. But when I looked at my bills, the travel we were doing, the dinners out with old friends, the grandchildren's birthdays, well, those numbers told a different story. That's why I was so struck when I came across the work of J.P. Morgan. You see, J.P. Morgan didn't just talk in generalities. They didn't sit around and make guesses. They went to the source: millions of American households, real families with real expenses. Back in 2019, they launched a study using data from more than 5 million households. Not surveys, not wishful thinking, actual spending patterns from banking clients and credit card users. And just recently, they updated that research with another 280,000 households. Let that sink in for a moment. That's not a small sample. That's not 100 people in a focus group. That's a window into how Americans truly live in retirement. Now, why does this matter to you and me? Because for once, we're not just talking about rules of thumb. We're talking about the truth, the kind you can only see when you track the dollars and cents as they move through everyday life. And when you strip away the myths, you start to see the real shape of retirement spending. This research brought to light three key discoveries. And let me tell you, as someone who has lived through many of these years myself, I found myself nodding along, sometimes smiling, sometimes wincing, because it felt like they had peeked right into my own checkbook. The three big findings were what they called the retirement spending surge, spending volatility, and the spending curve, or what some folks call the spending smile. Each one of these ideas paints a picture of how we Americans actually spend as we move from working life into retirement. But before we dive into those three, let's set the stage. The study first confirmed something many of us sense but don't always articulate. Spending tends to peak in our late 40s and early 50s. Think about it. That's the stage of life when you might still be paying off the mortgage, sending kids through college, helping them with cars or apartments, maybe even helping a parent with medical costs. On top of that, many folks in their 40s and 50s finally reach an income level where they allow themselves a few nicer things. My wife once teased me about heirloom quality. She meant we had moved past the stage of buying cheap throwaway furniture and had started picking up pieces we hoped might last for the grandkids to inherit. For us, that meant scouting Craigslist for sturdy, well-made tables instead of flat boxes from the discount store. But whether you're buying heirloom quality or just spending more freely, the truth is, midlife is expensive. Then something interesting happens. As the study shows, once you reach your early 50s, spending begins to decline, slowly at first, then more noticeably. That makes sense too. Children graduate, houses get paid down, and retirement saving becomes more serious. Many of us hit that moment in our 50s when we realize, oh boy, time is short. I'd better catch up on my savings. So even though expenses may ease, the drive to save intensifies. And then comes the turning point, retirement itself. According to the study, when most of us retire, a couple of big financial shifts happen all at once. We stop saving for retirement, which frees up a big chunk of our budget. Many of us make our final mortgage payment, or at least see that balance shrink dramatically. And if we had kids, by then they're usually off our payroll, building their own lives. That combination should feel like a huge sigh of relief. But here's where it gets fascinating and maybe a little surprising. The J.P. Morgan data revealed that when Americans actually step into retirement, our spending patterns don't just glide downward in a straight line. Instead, they bend and twist, shaped by our choices, our health, and our fears. For instance, a good number of households, especially those earning less than $150,000 a year, experience what's called a retirement spending surge. Right at the doorstep of retirement, expenses suddenly jump, and not just a little. People start spending more on healthcare, more on food, more on clothing. And in some cases, credit card debt climbs right alongside that spending. The researchers didn't pin down every reason why, but I can tell you from experience. When those retirement checks first start coming in, it's tempting to feel richer than you really are. You've been disciplined for so long, saving, working, delaying. Suddenly, you have time on your hands and income flowing. You give yourself permission to loosen the reins. Maybe it's a new wardrobe, maybe it's finally fixing that bad hip, maybe it's taking the family on a long postponed vacation. But one way or another, the wallet opens. Now, not everyone goes through this. The study noted that higher-income households, those above $150,000, don't see the same spike. And households that retire cold turkey, stopping work completely, tend to be more cautious. But for the majority who ease into retirement, there's a surge. And that's something worth planning for. But the story doesn't end there. The research also uncovered what they called spending volatility, the roller coaster of ups and downs in those early retirement years. We'll get into that in the next section, but let me leave you with this thought. J.P. Morgan's work confirms what so many of us feel in our bones. Retirement spending isn't a simple formula. It's not a steady 70% of what you used to spend. It's a living, breathing pattern with seasons, highs, lows, and unexpected turns. And that's why this research matters. Because if we understand these patterns, we can prepare for them. We can walk into retirement not with blind hope, but with eyes wide open, knowing what to expect and how to plan. When I sit down with friends from church or old coworkers over a cup of coffee, one of the questions that always comes up is, Stanley, does life really get cheaper after retirement? Some of them expect a simple yes or no, but let me tell you, it's more like answering whether the seasons always change in the same way. The short answer is yes. Retirement spending often goes down, but the long answer is much more colorful and worth telling. Think back with me for a moment. Most of us spent our late 40s and early 50s in what I like to call the spending storm. The mortgage was still hanging over our heads, the kids were in college or heading that way, and every time we turned around, someone needed braces, car repairs, or tuition checks. On top of that, many of us finally had higher salaries during those years, so we let ourselves buy nicer things, whether it was furniture, vacations, or a new set of golf clubs. For my wife and me, that was when she first started talking about quality that lasts. At the time, I thought it was just an excuse to spend more money, but she was right. Those years were expensive, but they were also the years we built the foundation for the life we have now. Now, here's where the J.P. Morgan study rings true. After that storm passes, things begin to calm down. By the time you hit your late 50s and 60s, the kids are usually standing on their own feet. The mortgage is closer to paid off, and suddenly the savings account looks more important than the shopping cart. Many of us wake up one morning and realize, I'd better get serious about this retirement thing. So spending begins to dip while saving starts to climb. That's the catch-up phase, tightening the belt not because life is cheaper yet, but because we know we need to prepare for the years ahead. Then retirement finally arrives. For me, it was like stepping onto a wide, open road after years of driving through heavy traffic. The pressure to save was gone. I wasn't setting aside chunks of every paycheck anymore. Our mortgage was nearly gone. The kids were building their own lives. Suddenly, our monthly budget felt lighter, more flexible. That's what J.P. Morgan's research captured so beautifully. At the moment of retirement, cash flow changes dramatically. It's not just about spending less, it's about where the money goes and how we feel about it. At first, many people, myself included, spend more in those early retirement years. Why? Because time suddenly becomes your most abundant resource. After decades of being too busy, you finally have hours to fill, and it feels natural to fill them with dinners out, travel, hobbies, or long overdue family gatherings. I remember those first years. We took the grandkids to Disney, visited old army buddies in Texas, and even splurged on a little RV trip across the Midwest. It felt good, and it felt deserved. But over time, spending starts to taper off. Not because life gets duller, but because priorities shift. You're not buying new wardrobes every season. You're not flying across the country quite as often. Simple routines, gardening, morning walks, church potlucks, become more than enough. Your lifestyle begins to cost less, even if it doesn't feel like you're cutting back. In fact, most retirees don't notice they're spending less because they're still living fully, just differently. Now, here's an important piece. Even though spending decreases overall, there's one category that refuses to shrink: healthcare. And that's something none of us can ignore. You might spend less on travel, dining, or gifts, but sooner or later, doctor visits, medications, or long-term care will knock on your door. The study shows healthcare costs growing at nearly 6% a year, far faster than the general rate of inflation. That means if you don't plan for it, it can sneak up and take a bigger and bigger bite out of your budget. I've seen neighbors blindsided by this, and it's not something I'd wish on anyone. So what does the big picture look like? Imagine a curve. It rises in midlife, peaks around the late 40s or early 50s, starts to slope downward as retirement approaches, then dips further as the years roll on. That's the natural rhythm of spending for most Americans. But tucked inside that curve are moments of surprise: a sudden medical bill, a once-in-a-lifetime family trip, or the early retirement spending surge that catches many off guard. It's not a smooth ride, it's a winding road. And that's why I call it a picture, not a formula. Every family paints it with different strokes. Some of us keep working part-time after retirement, stretching out income while easing into leisure. Others quit cold turkey and clutch their wallets tighter out of fear. Some splurge at the start, others save their treats for later. But across the board, the data tells us one truth: retirement spending is not a flat line. It's dynamic, it shifts with our stage of life, and it always demands attention. Looking back on my own journey, I can tell you this: the study didn't surprise me, it confirmed what I lived. Retirement is a season where money flows differently. It starts with a bit of celebration, settles into simplicity, and eventually demands serious preparation for health. If you expect that, plan for it, and build it into your financial picture, you won't be caught off guard. Instead, you'll be free to enjoy the years the way they're meant to be enjoyed, with peace, gratitude, and a sense of control. As I dug deeper into the J.P. Morgan research, three discoveries stood out to me. They're not just numbers on a page. They are realities I've seen in my own life and in the lives of my friends who retired around the same time I did. I want to share them with you, not as some cold financial lesson, but as wisdom we can all hold onto as we walk this path of retirement together. The retirement spending surge. Let's start with something I call the honeymoon effect of retirement. You finally hang up your work boots, turn in your office badge, or close the shop for the last time. And what do you feel? Freedom, relief, maybe even excitement. After years of clocking in and saving every penny you could, suddenly the gates are open. And what do most of us do when the gates open? We spend. The J.P. Morgan study confirmed what I've seen at barbecues, church gatherings, and family reunions. More than half of American households, 53%, don't retire all at once. They phase out. They work part-time, consult, or freelance while dipping their toes into the waters of retirement. And do you know what happens in those years? Their spending goes up, not down, up. Now here's the kicker. It's not just a little extra spending. It's a noticeable surge. The research showed higher bills in three specific areas: healthcare, food, and apparel. And for many households making under $150,000 a year, credit card debt began to creep up too. That's a dangerous combination: feeling freer, spending more, and swiping the card a little too often. I saw it myself. When I first retired, I thought, well, I've earned this. My wife and I went out to dinner more often. We bought clothes we didn't really need. We finally fixed my back with a round of physical therapy that wasn't cheap. And before I knew it, our credit card balance looked heavier than I expected. Now, not everyone experiences this. The study found that higher-income households didn't see the same surge. And folks who retired cold turkey, quitting work entirely, tended to spend more cautiously. But if you're like most Americans, easing into retirement, you might find yourself loosening the reins. It feels good at first, but it can be dangerous if you don't keep watch. That's lesson number one: expect the surge, plan for it, don't let it catch you off guard. Spending volatility. Now let's move to the second big finding, something J.P. Morgan called spending volatility. That's a fancy way of saying your retirement expenses won't be steady. They'll jump around. In the first few years of retirement, about 60% of households saw big swings, up or down by as much as 20%. One year you might think you're living on $80,000, and the next year it jumps to $100,000 or even $120,000. Then it could slide back down. It's like riding a roller coaster you didn't exactly sign up for. I can vouch for this. One year we hardly traveled at all. We stayed home, tended the garden, and lived quietly. Our expenses were low. The very next year, my daughter invited us to spend a month with her family in California. Between plane tickets, outings with the grandkids, and helping cover some of their unexpected costs, our spending ballooned. That's volatility. Now here's why that matters. If you plan too rigidly, thinking every year will cost the same, you can run into what financial planners call sequence of return risk. That's when you have to sell investments at a bad time, maybe during a market downturn, just to cover higher than expected bills. If you're not careful, that can spiral into something J.P. Morgan bluntly called the income death spiral. Once you start pulling too much too soon, it's hard to stop the slide. That's why I always tell folks, build some cushion. Have liquid funds, cash, or something safe, ready to cover those up and down years. Expect that the first 5 years of retirement won't be smooth sailing. You'll spend more some years, less others, but if you've prepared for volatility, you'll ride it out without panic. The spending smile. And finally, let's talk about one of the most eye-opening discoveries: the spending smile. Now, don't think of this as a grin on your face, though it might make you smile once you understand it. Think of it as the shape of your spending curve. According to J.P. Morgan's research, retirees often spend more in the early years. That's when you're still healthy, energetic, and eager to travel, eat out, or tackle projects around the house. Then, as the years pass, spending typically declines. Life slows down, the big trips become fewer, the hobbies become simpler, you start to spend less whether you notice it or not. But here's the twist. Near the end of retirement, spending climbs again, almost like the curve of a smile lifting at the edges. Why? Healthcare. Plain and simple. Medical bills, prescriptions, assisted living, long-term care, they all add weight to the budget. And they grow faster than regular inflation. The study found that while general spending inflation averaged around 1.8% for retirees, healthcare costs grew at about 6% per year. That's brutal. A couple retiring today might expect to spend around $13,700 per year on Medicare, but in just 10 years, that number can balloon to $24,500. And that doesn't even include long-term care, which the study says about 65% of men and 75% of women will need at some point. When I look back, I can see this smile clearly in my own journey. The first years after retirement, my wife and I traveled, spoiled the grandkids, and enjoyed our freedom. Then came a quieter phase, less spending, more simple joys. And now, well, I'm in the part of life where doctor visits and prescription refills are part of the routine. It's not glamorous, but it's real. And it's why planning matters, pulling the lessons together. So what does all this mean for you? It means that retirement spending isn't a straight line. It doesn't march upward by 3% a year like so many generic calculators suggest. Instead, it bends and shifts. There's a surge at the start. There's volatility in the early years. And there's a smile-shaped curve that dips and then rises again near the end. If you plan only for averages, you might miss the real risks, the credit card debt from that early surge, the stress of volatility, or the heavy weight of healthcare in your later years. But if you understand these patterns, you can prepare with wisdom. You can build a retirement plan that bends with life instead of breaking under pressure. Here's the way I see it. Retirement is not about cutting back until there's nothing left. It's about spending wisely, enjoying the freedom you've earned, and being honest about the costs that lie ahead. If you do that, if you accept the surge, respect the volatility, and prepare for the smile, you'll walk through retirement with steadier steps, even when the road twists and turns. And isn't that what we all want? To live these years with peace of mind, knowing we've planned well, so we can focus on the things that really matter: family, faith, community, and the simple joy of each day. So what does all of this mean for you, my friends? It means retirement is not a straight road with neat little mile markers. It's more like a country drive through hills and valleys. There will be seasons when you feel richer than ever, ready to enjoy the fruits of your labor. There will be years when unexpected bills rattle the budget, when you'll need to lean on savings or adjust your plans. And eventually, there will come a stage when healthcare and long-term care rise to the forefront. The lesson from the J.P. Morgan study and from my own life is that peace of mind in retirement doesn't come from guessing or hoping. It comes from preparing with clear eyes. If you know the spending surge is coming, you can set aside a little cushion. If you expect volatility, you won't panic when one year costs more than the last. And if you plan for the spending smile, you won't be blindsided by healthcare down the road. Instead of living in fear, you'll live in confidence. And trust me, confidence is one of the sweetest gifts you can carry into your later years. Now, as I wrap up today's conversation, let me leave you with this. Retirement is not about shrinking your life. It's about shaping it wisely so you can keep living with joy and dignity. I've been blessed with more than a decade of this journey, and I want the same for you. Don't let myths and half-truths steer your future. Learn the patterns, make a plan, and walk this road with hope. Thank you for spending this time with me. If what I've shared today has helped you, please do me a small favor. Hit the like button, subscribe to the channel, and share this video with a friend or family member who's starting to think about retirement. It could make all the difference for them. And as always, may your days ahead be filled with peace, purpose, and the quiet joy of a well-planned life.